Well, I'm super excited, guys and girls, to be diving in with our very first thought leader and visionary of the Catalysts of Change Summit. This incredible visionary that we're about to bring onto the screen. I was so delighted when he said yes to writing the foreword for the book, because I believe that whether you are in a position where you believe you're the leader that you were born to be yet, or whether you know that there's another level, or maybe 2, 3, or 4 levels that you know that you're working to, we're going to dive into that right now. Let's get him up onto the global stage. Darren Stevens, hello, welcome.
Good morning. How are we?
We're awesome. Absolutely awesome. You are joining us live from Northampton this morning, I believe.
I am. It's freezing down here, I'm afraid. But I'm sure I'll warm up.
You're trying to warm up. You've got your hat and everything on, bless you. Guys and girls, let Darren know, where are you tuning in from today? He said from Northampton. I'm in Colchester at the point of making this. So we're in Essex in England. Where are you watching in from or tuning in from? Darren, I love your foreword for the book. I mean, it really, even just your introduction, lining everybody up for all of the incredible transformation that they're about to receive as they go through the book. I want to start by at the very beginning of your chapter, you say something which is so thought-provoking, and I really want us to start here. And guys and girls, remember, go and buy the book. Make sure you go buy the book, because you'll get access to not only Dr. Darren with his workshop, which we'll talk about in a bit, but all the other workshops that our thought leaders in this book and summit are providing for you to thrive in 2025. So I want to come back to this very beginning of your foreword, Darren, where you say, every morning, countless entrepreneurs wake up carrying an invisible weight on their shoulders. It's not the weight of their business responsibilities, their employees' livelihoods, or even their financial obligations. Though these are undoubtedly significant, instead, it's the weight of their own unexpressed potential held back by the gravitational pull of fear. I mean, that's so visceral. I feel that in my body. It's the weight of their own unexpressed potential. How much of that have you seen across the course of your career? I bet you see that every day.
I do. And it's not just fear. In my theory that I created called constructive development theory, it's the fear is born of really their attitude towards risk. And the ones that are the most fearful are really the ones who are the most away from in their thinking. All right. So if anybody here has done any NLP kind of training, what you're then taught is, let's be more goal oriented. Let's be just go-getters. And that's a towards orientation. But what we find is that depending on the kind of business you're in will depend on what kind of attitude you have towards risk. And it creates this fear of actually taking steps, because you don't do towards. It's not that you're towards and away from, it's that you are away from, which means you're not doing towards. You're stopping yourself from actually taking action. Now, in some instances, let me just quickly caveat this with the fact that my wife is very risk averse, and she's a banker. You know, she was a banker. And being a risk averse banker is actually quite useful. So think about that for a second. Yeah. So, but for an entrepreneur, it's not that bloody useful, because you actually are the one putting all the money up, doing all your marketing, getting out to see customers. If you stop yourself from doing any of those things because of this fear, because of this away from perspective, how are you going to grow your business? So in the forward, what I was talking about was, we need to address the fear by addressing your thinking. And I think you're probably going to ask me questions about how we construct our thinking anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, because the model that you've developed has not been just thought up overnight. Tell us, how did you get to the point of this model that you've now developed, that you're rolling out globally, supporting entrepreneurs and organizations to really elevate their thinking and the thinking of those around them?
Well, for everybody here, the idea came when I was using a system called the Identity Compass, and it deconstructs our thinking into a profile of 50 cognitive shortcuts. One of them is towards, one of them is away from. There are 48 more. And I was working at a university in London, And I noticed when I was profiling master's students that no matter where they were from in the world, the one thing that unites us and actually divides us, because you've got to look at both sides, isn't the color of our skin, isn't whether we're male, female, black, white, whatever. It's about how we think. So if you have a high-level thinker from Nigeria, how do they think in comparison to a high-level person from Singapore, from England? And what it boils down to is how they are self-aware. How do they know what they know about their own thinking patterns? So for me, it was a natural outcome of this work with these foreign students to turn this into a PhD, to say, look, do we really do this? Is a high-level thinker in Nigeria roughly the same as a high-level thinker in England? And the outcome was, yes, if we know that we are towards away from, but more importantly, we can choose which one we use in the moment, that by the very definition is a high-level thinker. Think about your own thinking. Can you choose to do something in the moment from a position of intention, awareness, choice, and response? And if you can, I don't care where you're from. Yeah, you're a high-level thinker. Is that okay? Does that make sense?
I think like it's good to let the audience really pause on that for a moment. Can you, like, when you think about that question, you know, are you immediately, like for me, it was immediately yes, 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 yes to all of those. And I know people that would say no, yes,
yeah,
maybe,
so,
yes, no.
So what I do with my current students, because they're all from everywhere, my main question to determine their level of complex thinking, to get over this fear that they might have of coming to another country, is can you step out of your culture so that it doesn't impact your thinking? And I think, as you said, the older ones say, yes, they can, you know, the ones above 35, 40, but the younger ones say maybe not. But the younger ones are really thinking that it seems a bit scary to step out of my culture. This is all I've ever known. You know, how on earth would I think differently? Now, that in itself is a cause for concern and potential fear. Now, transpose that to the arena of entrepreneurship, transpose that to, I don't actually mind which arena we put that in. The fear is real, that if you want to change your thinking, it's potentially scary.
It is. And on the journey that you've been on, and with, you know, this amazing model that you've developed, you're running a lot of experiments and surveys, and you've developed a model that enables people like us, entrepreneurs, to find out what our dream clients are actually thinking and how they think. And I think that's an incredible asset to have, not only learning how we think, but how the people that you're wanting to consume your ideas or your content, or you know, you want these people to buy from you. I mean, it just makes perfect sense from a marketing point of view anyway. To me, it's like, well, you would analyze your market, wouldn't you? You'd learn about your market, you'd understand you know, what their buying behaviors are and where they're buying from and why they buy. But we're not really looking at why they think the way they do or how they think. So talk to us about how you're developing this for people like us that want to know that information and really need to know that information.
Well, interesting to me, I've created a new questionnaire system. It's an entirely new format. And what it does is it can be used for lead generation. So let's pretend you're, I'm going to use a real example. My friend is a designer and a marketer kind of thing, right? And he did some work for a company over in the Middle East. And they gave him the commission, and he did all the work. He designed their logo, their brand, all the stuff about brand stuff that I don't actually understand. So forgive my language. He did all of that. 6 months later, he gave it to them, and they hadn't even done the first steps of creating the structure for themselves in their ear. And he's like, guys, you've paid me for this, but you've wasted your time. So what I said to him was, look, use my new questionnaire. What it will do is it will give you levels of brand awareness, right? 0 awareness to Apple. Let's make it up like that. Beg your pardon. 0 awareness to Sammy, right? Right. So what it does is it's not just you give them 7 questions, because any more than that they start to switch off. How do you know your brand? What does it do for you? Blah blah blah. depending on where they click the responses, will give you their level of awareness of how to brand themselves. But what that does for Patrick is it tells them specifically what product he needs to develop with them. It tells them, do you know your brand? No, I don't at all. Do you know your brand? Yes, I do. I've been working with Sammy, right? He know based on that information, the questionnaire tells him which products to sell. Here, he knows it's a long-term project. He's got this specific set of products. He can sell them. Here, he knows it's a much more difficult sell, but more importantly, it's a much more intense, detailed, developed position because they're so good at it. He then knows roughly what he's going to do for them and how much it's going to cost them. So the questionnaire teases out not just their level of complex thinking, their level of awareness of what they're doing, but it also in the background, it teases out, remember we said towards and away from, look at risk. Well, depending on how the questions are written, I've mapped in the cognitive intentions and it will tell him how risk averse they are. So it might be that they've got a really good awareness of where they are in the brand, but they're not very good at spending money because they're risk averse. It's a brand new concept. No one's ever done it before. And it's called the Question Lab. The website is up and running. The questionnaires are they're 99% ready to go. We've got one that's for students that's ready to go, one for police, which is ready to go. And the good thing is, if you guys are entrepreneurs, how you think in your specific industry will require different thinking for different customers. Well, we can tailor a questionnaire for individual industries. Because let me ask you this. Are you a coach because of how you think? Or do you think that way because you're a coach? Change the question. Accountant, footballer. You get the point, right? My wife's an accountant and she's an accountant because of how she thinks. She's detailed and procedural and very thorough. That's not me. So I would never be an accountant. So we can tailor the questionnaire to each of your industries because you require different thinking for different customers. I hope that makes sense, Sammy.
It makes complete sense because, like language is a big part of what I'm always working with. What language do you need to be able to communicate effectively with the person that you're wanting to connect with and communicate that to? And I think certainly for everybody that's listening to this, you need to know how you're communicating, whether it's even with family, that the people that are close to you, like it'd be very valuable to understand how they think, to communicate with them.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I'm saying this as an expert in what I do, but that doesn't mean I can do it. And the reason I say that, it's not false humility. It's because I talk at this level and I use my partners to deliver the marketing message at this level, right? And it's not because I'm super clever, it's because I don't know what I'm doing, right?
Well, but also language, because I think, the kind of more academic you are or the more advanced you are in any topic, I think it's, and I see demonstrations of this every single day. It's what I call expert syndrome. Yeah. And expert syndrome is where you've forgotten what it's like to be at the beginning because you've solved the problem, or it doesn't mean you're more intelligent or more of anything than the people that are coming up through it. You just forget because this is now the environment you're living in. This is the way of thinking that you're naturally just thinking and living and breathing and eating and sleeping and walking and talking every single day. And it can be so challenging to then take that hat off and go back to the beginning. Oh, how did I feel then? Or what would be the best way for me to learn this? So I love the fact that you can get it in black and white. This is how they're actually thinking. So the language you can use can be completely tailored to the audience. I think that is a stupidly intelligent way of doing it. It's almost so simple. Why isn't everyone doing it already?
I mean, if you think about the massive community you've created, there's going to be a culture within that community. Okay, that culture will resonate with a certain way of thinking. Just to be a geek for a second, there's something called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis that determines our language creates our culture. The way you guys talk to each other is determining your actual community culture, right? That's also true for accountants, for marketers, for footballers, as I mentioned earlier, all of those things. So we need to know and understand what language they're using, as you say. But now, if we then bring into it different levels of thinking, right? What level of customer do you need? Do you need somebody who is not quite as complex in their thinking and might need their hand holding? Or do you want to try to attract really complex people who don't need their hand holding, but just trying to get them is really, really difficult because they're so high functioning in what they do? Yeah. For me, I'm aiming it at the wrong level. So I use my colleague Louise to say, no, Darren, we need to get these people in. And if you're all entrepreneurs, you need to get these people in and build them up to this kind of, well, you know, I pretend I know things, but clearly I don't know everything.
I mean, it's just such an intelligent way of communicating, because I think that is that's something that we all need to consider for any change maker, any catalyst of change, which all of you are that are watching and listening to this right now. You're all going to be speaking. You're all going to be sharing your message in some way. You're going to be hearing from Holly Rafferty all about storytelling, that it's the stories we not only tell ourselves, but the stories we tell others, and how you communicate that story, I think, you know, would be very intelligently underpinned by the work that you're doing here, Darren. And I suppose what I'm most curious about, and what I think our audience will be really curious about, is how do you know what level you are to be? You know, it's one thing to survey all of the people that we want to influence and support, but how do we know what level we are? Have you got something up your sleeve that can help us to learn that?
Yeah, so I use the Identity Compass profile system because it deconstructs our thinking into 50 cognitive shortcuts. And for my PhD, I had 8,200 profiles to support my hypothesis. And that's quite a lot, especially when you consider that things like the MBTI are used all around the world, and they had 16,000, and they're a global institute. And I'm one bloke with an institute now, but when I did my research on my own, I had 8,000 profiles. And what it told me, the data told me, that depending on whether you can choose, well, here, or not choose, how you construct you in the moment will give me a level of your self-awareness and your cognitive and social emotional complexity. So for example, if anybody wanted to do the profile, there is a charge, obviously. I'll do it much cheaper for anybody watching this, but it'll take you about half an hour, and then it will tell me your thinking quotient score and your awareness quotient score. Now, the TQ is mapped to a guy called Robert Keegan and Otto Lasky, and they've got their own systems for measuring complexity. So I did that as part of my PhD. The awareness quotient is my system, and that tells me specifically where your thinking is out of kilter. And in order to change your worldview, let me put it to you this way: somebody who's extremely external in their thinking eventually will require therapy, right? So if we can do an intervention that makes you think from an internal perspective for a short period of time, at my age, about 3 months, but if you're young, probably less, right? If we can get you being internal for a few months, it literally physically changes the pathways, the myelin pathways in your brain, so you get to the point where you can choose which one you are. Now, that is not just an internal external shift, that's a worldview shift, because you're no longer a sheep, you're no longer a doormat, you're no longer doing as you're told. Combine it with some other cognitive intentions, you're forthright, you're, standing up for yourself. It's completely different. And that's just on 2, maybe 3 cognitive intention changes.
Oh, that's crazy. That's crazy. Like what I, as you're talking there, I'm like, oh, I wonder what would happen if you, you obviously know the answer to this, but I wonder what would happen if in a really chilled out, almost like spa type state, answering that question versus, maybe 30 minutes before someone's about to get up and speak on stage.
Yeah.
Or to do something completely out of their comfort zone, bungee jump, or
that's better.
Would the answers be different?
Yeah, because for me, standing up on stage and talking is exactly the same as this. I have no problem doing it at all, right? 10 people or 1,000 people makes no difference to me. Of course, I'm a university lecturer as well, so that's helpful. But yes, you're absolutely right. If in the way we construct our thinking is contextual, so the Darren that you've got here is a different construction to the Darren on the golf course, to the Darren in the pub, to the Darren in the living room. Not too different, because I'm aware. So the key isn't that it's a different construction of Darren. The key is, am I aware of it, and can I choose my construction in the moment to suit the environment? If I can, I'm high level according to my system.
Wow. Well, I hope that you can give us the link to the system. In fact, let me get it up onto the screen now. So, well, I mean, can we get it at the web address that we already have for you? If we put that up on the screen, can we go and
Yeah, there's a lot of information there. Yes.
Perfect. So guys and girls, if you want to go profile yourself, go to that link on there. What does it do, Darren? Does it give us like a PDF or something? What's the process? We do half an hour of the test, and then what happens?
Yeah, so you in reality at this stage, I'm afraid you'd have to email me and say, Darren, can I do a profile? And the reason for that is because it comes from Germany, and it's owned by, it's not that one that I'm talking about, the identity company is not my profile system. It's another guy's, his name's Anna, in Germany. And if you email me and said, Darren, I'd love to do a profile, I would then send you a link to do the profile. It would take you about half an hour, maybe a little longer, depending on you. You've got 3 weeks to do it. There's no rush. You can do it with a glass of wine in your living room. It's up to you. And then once you've done it, I'll get an email, and then I'll send you the invoice afterwards. That's absolutely fine. Yeah.
And so, because what I'm thinking is what a really cool thing to do would be, I believe, me and my bright ideas. I mean, this book came about as a bright idea 2 weeks ago, so they work quite often. I'm thinking that maybe for your masterclass that we do together in 2025, I'm thinking that maybe if everybody does their profile, what we can do is then run the masterclass, which, you know, dive in and explore what that actually means.
Well, that'd be really interesting. Yeah, that'd be really interesting, because let's say we all, I mean, I don't know about you, but do we all identify as entrepreneurs, right?
Yes. Yeah. Certainly in our community, mostly. Yeah.
Yeah. So if 10, 15, 100 people did a profile, I could put them all together to get a composite profile of the ultimate entrepreneur. Imagine that. Now, what you could do for that from a Sammy perspective is you could then say, look, this is the profile. These are the top 5 cognitive shortcuts that we use as entrepreneurs. This is how you develop your thinking as an entrepreneur. You work on these top 5 cognitive intentions. Does that make sense?
It does.
That
would be
cool.
So much fun. Guys and girls, are you in? Should we do this? That would be awesome. To not only be part of the experiment and coming up with it, but I think to be able to explore what is the ultimate entrepreneur, and what can we choose to walk away from so that we can focus on what we're all moving towards.
Yes, exactly.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Darren, when we go through this experience called life, and we meet other people who aren't thinking the same way, and it is the most frustrating thing on the planet when you cannot get through to somebody who is not thinking the same as you, whether they're friends, family, work colleagues, because there are people that are tuning into this that also are the catalyst for another catalyst. They might be a catalyst within an organization, building someone else's organization, not their own. What would be your best advice as we come to the end of this interview? What would be your best advice for working with people who do not think the same way as you? All
right. Now, you might not like this. And the reason you won't like it is because I'm going to make you responsible. The person with the greatest self-awareness has the responsibility to control the conversation, to control the interaction. If the other person isn't aware and you're more aware, you are responsible for that interaction. Okay? They can't be, by virtue of the fact that they're not aware. But what they do, and this is where it's frustrating for you guys, exactly as Sammy just said it. What they do is they look at you and they listen to your language and watch your behaviors, and they filter it through their lower level pattern, their lower level lens, and they get it wrong because they're trying to deconstruct it in the way they know, right? So they invariably get you wrong. You, on the other hand, can see all their patterns, right? You can hear their language. You know what they're doing and thinking to a certain extent. If that's the case and you're a higher level thinker than they are, It's on you to control the interaction. And you could use words like empathize and things like that. It does depend on what your priorities are and what you want to do. So if you meet people like that, if it's a client, a customer, or even a supplier, it's on you, I'm afraid, to control it.
That's so good though, isn't it? Because it's so easy to get in the kind of blame game. Well, they just don't get what I'm talking about. And I love that. I personally am a huge fan of radical responsibility. And it does start with us. And if we're going to create ripples of impact, if we're going to be catalysts of change, then it doesn't start with somebody else. But naturally, by its very essence of what it is, a catalyst is the start of something. So guys and girls, take responsibility for the way you communicate, but also take responsibility for the way that you lead as the visionary that you are. Darren, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I know how hugely busy you are. Do you have one lasting parting inspirational thought for us all as we make our way into our very first, or next, because you're first, of course, with the forward, into our very next interview right straight after this?
Yeah, please just stop and step back and think about how things impact you in the moment. Are you actually thinking in the moment, or are you just in a habit form? Are you automatic? Stop, step back and think about what you're doing right now. And is it a choice?
Is it a choice? Oh, gosh. If we had a mic, we'd be dropping it right now. Darren, thank you for leaving us on a high. We love you. We appreciate you. And guys and girls, make sure you go and buy the book. Dr. Darren's foreword, just the foreword alone will have you thinking differently before you've even read any of the other chapters. So go buy the book now, buy it for somebody else. Make sure you buy it, sign it, send it to them. They will thank you forever. Darren, thank you once again. And guys and girls, we will be back with our next catalyst of change in a few months.